there's a real catabolic nature to GERD patients. They're always really busy. They're doing stuff. It's like they've got 3 jobs. They can't sit still. They're always cleaning. They're always going to the gym. They're always cooking. They're always doing stuff for other people. And a lot of the time, they're always women.
Welcome back to the Gutology podcast. In today's episode, functional medicine practitioner Julia Davies is joined by gut health nutritionist Hannah Richards for a deep dive into the fascinating connection between your gut and your brain. You'll discover how the gut and brain communicate, the role of the nervous system in gut regulation, and how self-expression can support gut health. Plus, Julia and Hannah hear from listeners who've been on their own journey with gut challenges. Let's get into it.
So should we just set the scene first a little bit and just explain what is a gut-brain axis, what are the connections, what sort of people should actually be interested in pursuing this connection, because it's so strong, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we spent so long thinking about that the body and the mind, or the body and the brain, or the body and the head are 2 completely different entities. You know, if you had something centuries ago wrong with your body, you went to the doctor, and if you had something wrong with your head, they almost locked you up. And hopefully we're not in that place anymore, but trying to make the connection between that they connect and they're one entity is the premise of the gut-brain axis, that they're connected by the vagus nerve, and it's a communication system, it's a highway. And the question is, does the gut affect the brain, or is the brain affecting the gut? And I guess the answer is both. Both need to be looked at in their entirety to get to the answers of why the symptoms currently exist before the diagnoses are made. So I think everyone should be looking at it. And with every ailment that you may or may not have, whether it's your big toe or your blocked ear, the gut-brain axis has a role to play in any comorbidities that we may see.
The way my mind works is that, of course, they're connected because the body is functioning as a whole, complete system. But I suppose if you think about the way the medical system is organised in its orthodox way, if you've got a tummy problem, you'd see a gastroenterologist. Right. Or if you've got a brain problem, you might see a psychiatrist or a neurologist, but not necessarily both of those people at the same time unless there was a real indication.
Sure.
So I suppose maybe culturally people do have this feeling of separation of the organs, the systems, the problems. And even when you do talk to your GP, you're quite often asked, can you just keep it to one problem because we've only got
this amount of time,
7 minutes. So
yeah. And the other thing on that, with all these specialists, quite rightly so, but often the answer is a suppressant. Is a suppressant for that issue. So, you know, any kind of drug in a way takes away the pain. And what we're trying to do is find the pain, sit with the pain, and understand where that came from and how it's manifested or found its way to causing an overt issue without dampening it down. And in gastro health, I find that particularly, obviously I'm not an expert anywhere else, that a lot of the medications are just all suppressants. I've got 8 minutes here, take that. I mean, the other day, I had a client who had done her due diligence, found me, emailed me, told me the symptoms, been happening for 10 years. So we had a chat, we had a Zoom, and then at the very last moment said, actually, my consultant's going to put me on amitriptyl for 4 weeks. So I'm going to give that a go first. So I wrote back and said, obviously, you can do what works for what you feel feels right, but these are all the considerations you need to look at. And she wrote back, said, "Oh my God, I'm working with you."
Yeah.
Because that drug would then dampen down the connection between the gut and the brain, and not give any relief. And the symptoms was gastroesophageal reflux disease.
Right. Okay.
So, a lot of the people are doing a lot of good work, naturally, holistically, by themselves, then potentially seeing someone medical. And this isn't a judgment at all, but the only answer sometimes is the suppressant.
Suppressants are amazingly useful, aren't they? Yeah. And I think sometimes, I mean, that's why we're really lucky to have the medical system that we do, because sometimes you just absolutely need to switch off that process. But I think we're in the sort of the long-term healing game, aren't we, really? And trying to really understand the reason why. Yeah. It doesn't matter what you have, it's why you have it. Yeah. And I think there's that belief system that if you have a problem, let's take an example, something really silly like hay fever. Someone would say, there's a tablet for that. Yeah. Like, you don't have to suffer, because there's there is a tablet for everything, to just suppress it, but then not understanding what's driving it and causing it, which means actually that underlying physiology continues for years and years and years until it comes up in a different way. Yeah. And then eventually it will come up in a way that absolutely needs you to look at it and take it apart. But I think it's almost like a belief system, I think, a real pattern that a lot of people in the modern world that we live in now, particularly westernised, is just that you fix your problems with a tablet. And there's not many people, as they get into their later decades, that aren't taking quite a list of medication to control their symptom, but yet consider themselves completely well. Yeah. So it's not to say medication's bad, but they're considering themselves really well and healthy, because the blood pressure is normal, even though they're on 4 tablets to make it that way. They're on an antidepressant because of various things that they're, and it is, I think that is quite difficult. It's a lot of hard work to really take that root cause approach, isn't it? Yeah. But it's so fulfilling when you do, because it actually changes where things are going, changes the trajectory.
Yeah, and again, it's the same as what we're just saying, it's the dumbing down, it's the suppressant, it's the not feeling anything. And it's a dangerous game, because pain is there to give us an opportunity to make the change, in the inflammation cascade. And the moment, and that's why I find it really interesting with certainly people I'm seeing, they want the supplement. Where's the supplement? How can I take more? What about another thing? And actually, by the time we're into 2 months' work, I'm saying to them, actually, you're in control of a lot of the triggers here. You're in control of a lot of the things causing the issues, but you've swept them under the carpet because the consistency of changing the habit is just too difficult in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're still in the game of wanting to take something, and I don't know if it's someone's told me I've got this diagnosis, which isn't, the diagnosis isn't the end game. It's not it hasn't solved the problem, and a lot of the time we see it as that we've got the diagnosis. I've got acid reflux. I've got this. Okay, great.
At best, it describes what your experience is.
Exactly. Oh. And in the science, there's the diagnosis and then the medication to go with it. Yeah. And we're not looking at the pain cascade, and we're not looking at the emotional connection, which is the gut-brain axis. We've just stopped. So, we've got a lot of people who are numb.
Yeah.
We're walking around a bit numb, and it's only when you dive in and you ask the right question. And that's the role that I see practitioners, that's my role. My job is to, I always say, what are you not telling me? And that's my job to find that out. And over time and over 6 hours of talking and supporting, you get to the root cause of their pain, or their discomfort, or their wounds that have been triggered, and their understanding of lots of things, going into the emotional side of the gut-brain axis. It's about being able to understand who they are, because the conditions that are alive within the gut have stemmed from a stress place, and the stress place has led them into acid reflux or constipation or SIBO, which are all emotional energy issues for me. And there's definitely the mechanical side of it and the physiology, and we do all that. But a lot of the time, the people with gut issues have done all that work.
Yeah.
They're not just popping Gaviscon and hoping for a better life. They're mini nutritionists. They've done the research. They've done the work. They've got the best supplements. They're doing organic food. They're doing their breath work. They're doing their yoga, except with acid reflux. There's a real catabolic, sympathetic pace to people with that symptom, that the lifestyle stuff doesn't allow to happen so naturally. I mean, if you're a stressed CEO and I say to you, well, listen, John, I think you probably just need to go off and do a bit of yoga. You'd be like, oh my God, that's going to stress me out even more.
Yeah.
So by asking the right questions and digging in the right places at the right time, you get to understand the person that has the symptom and not treat the symptom, which is what the whole world and wellness place is actually still doing under a guise of a green pharma.
Yeah, completely agree. It's meeting people where they're at as well, isn't it? And not just presuming that they're coming to see you so they're ready to know all of this. Actually, they need guidance to help them on their way, because everything they've done so far is not, either it's worked for a little bit and then it's all fallen back again, or it's just not worked at all and they don't understand why. Then they feel already like they've failed. So they're causing themselves a lot of distress because they think, but I've done this and I did the diet. Maybe I wasn't strict enough. Maybe I wasn't good enough. And it brings in those new psychological patterns that can really...
Absolutely. And just on that, you know, I don't know if you were going to talk about elimination diets. I've done the diet. And we hear that quite a lot as nutritionists, right? I've done the diet. I did the elimination diet. I did the FODMAPs. Did it work? No, it wasn't a solution. It's like exactly the same as taking a pill. I did that and it didn't work. And a lot of the time I remember saying to a client a few months ago, when you connect to this, when you make the connection and you start to connect, you'll start to see results. But if you still see it as this for that and this should work and why doesn't it work and why me and why can't I get better, then it doesn't work. And it's about that sort of brain relaxing into, okay, trust myself, let me do the work, let me trust you, let's do the work together. And it doesn't sound, you're sort of like, well, what are you saying, Hannah? Well, it's because it's not about the supplements, it's not about the elimination. It's about reducing the stress release. You know, on Instagram and social at the minute, I don't know if you've seen it, all these cortisol diets. There's this wave, this trend of, oh, you're puffy faced and you can't lose weight because of cortisol. Let's reduce. We need cortisol.
Yeah, cortisol's got the bad guy reputation. It really has. But it's a natural anti-inflammatory.
And
so
suddenly
we need to regulate it, not just hate it.
Exactly.
And try and get rid of it.
But this is what we're fighting against. Suddenly we've got all these. Keep banging the table. Suddenly we've got all these normal people. Civilians who are just selling products. And, you know, I get a lot, you know, with people I work with constipation, people say, I didn't know you existed. So if they've done their research to find a nutritionist that can solve these issues, but they're being flooded with people selling products, we're in a place where it's unfair for people to still be in these places because the industry is working against them all the time.
I think that's it. It's knowledge that there is a huge industry here.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it's playing into the fact that people can get really desperate with their gut issues, really desperate. Yeah. And if the solution is presented to them, they want to believe it. Yeah. Like it's human nature. You're like, oh, maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer for me. Oh, it costs £200 a month, but it'll be worth it because, and you know, this when people end up at my clinic, they've usually seen many, many doctors and other practitioners in their natural health and orthodox. And then they get here and they've spent every single money that they've got. There's nothing left. And it's actually the way that you actually overcome it is all that inner insight that's free. It doesn't cost you financially, but I feel that, you know, in my experience of clinic, and I feel yours is probably quite similar, people will go through all of that stuff first before looking at the really tough stuff. But the key to getting better is finding, what do you find almost most difficult, the thing that you don't want to go there, that's the thing that's the key for you.
Absolutely.
And that's really hard. So almost, I think the way our brains work, particularly with all the modern distractions, is you go for everything else first. You want it to be something, you want it to be a deficiency. You want something to show up on your blood test or
what's
your
the
stool
intolerance?
test. What probiotic am I missing? I need Akkermansia and that will change my life. And all of that will be followed through with all that hope and then all the disappointment. And so by the time they do see somebody like you and me, we've got actually all of that is compounding the original issue that they've been trying to heal. So it's really important to get this philosophy out there, really. That
Well, people are in so much more control of their health than they realise. With constipation, you know, I do see a lot of constipated people, and acid reflux, and the question is always. I work with people for 12 weeks, but I have a really big intake. And I always say to people, look, short of me coming to live with you for a week, I need all this information, temperature, pulse, mood, food, bowel, thoughts, sleep, all the timings of everything. I say, if you do it for 5 days and you become an A-star student, I'll be able to really get a good insight into you. It's incredible the amount of people that fill, if there's 100 boxes to fill in, you fill in 5. Yeah. I'm like, right, you're not really that keen to do the work. But, you know, we're looking at the patterns and we're looking at, you know, how their life is playing out on a daily basis. And once I've added up the averages and looked at the patterns and show people, I mean, it sounds really basic, but I then point out things to people that they just see as normal.
What sort of things, like, would you say?
I would say, like, bedtime is a massive one. So acid reflux is a big one for sleep, right?
Yeah.
So, and there's a real catabolic nature to GERD patients, clients, and they're always really busy. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. They're always
There's a pattern.
There's
a
pattern.
There's
a pattern.
You?
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a pattern of people that are busy. They're doing stuff. It's like they've got 3 jobs. They can't sit still. They're always cleaning. They're always going to the gym. They're always cooking. They're always doing stuff for other people. And a lot of the time, they're always women. And it's sort of this. So you sort of say to them, "Why are you doing all this stuff?" And it becomes this, I have to do this, otherwise this will happen. I have to be this person, otherwise this will happen.
It's kind of almost like a fear-based
It's totally
thought as well, really, isn't it? It's like,
so you're trying to get to a place where, okay, we know the food, we know the triggers, right? Throw out the tomatoes, you know? But really it's about, the work is about then looking at the triggers of the, you know, what triggers you physiologically, what reaction do you have, and who triggers you emotionally. So we start looking at that kind of work, and then doing instead of the I have to do this, I choose to do that. And they get this sense of relief because they've just been working through these patterns, this old programming for their whole life, that this works. The same with, you know, potential, you know, it's same in the addiction, over exercising, under eating, over whatever it is. All of them are over and unders. And once you recognize, you can see those patterns, you point them out, and then that's when you're digging deeper into why are you doing this? Shall we agree it's not working? I say. Should we agree all of this isn't working? I mean, some people leave, but some people are like, it's a bit rude, but it's true. So we have to say, well, this isn't working because you have these symptoms, so should we change it? Yeah, let's change it. And I'm not changing the food a lot, really, because by the time
They've already done it, haven't
they?
They've
already done it. They're mini nutritionists. So it's about getting into the patterns and asking why they do the things they do, and where the pain is and how much they want to change out of that. But invariably, no one's ever asked those questions. And so it's the support. It's the constant support that you give that allows a person to relax.
Yeah.
And not be that stressed. Look, this is being bunged up constantly. Can you imagine being this tight the whole time? So the support allows the relaxation, and that allows a relaxed digestive system, which then we start talking.
Yeah, you've got to enable that sense of safety for the body.
Exactly.
Because they can be all on board mentally and cognitively, but then the body has been in a sort of panic state for maybe quite some years and not knowing how to deal with certain things. And so part of the techniques is enabling the brain and the nervous system to feel safe enough to actually make the changes. And that's really key, isn't it? And some people aren't really quite ready for that. But I think by the time a lot of them come to us, then they usually are.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing. Like, you know, not everyone is ready, right?
Yeah.
And some people aren't quite ready to do, you know, I was saying to someone the other day, God, you know, everything's changing. I spoke to a good 4 people last week to do some work. And actually the truth is that not everyone that comes through your door is ready. You know, even though you're dying to help,
but
you're
it's not up to us.
Exactly.
I think that's it. If you sense, it's like we'll put all our brain work on it. If you're ready, if you're not ready, it's not the right thing. Like,
and it's not as easy as just doing a session or take this, eliminate that. Yeah. This is 12 weeks. Yeah. This is 12 weeks where we're going to really go on a journey together. Yeah. Some people are like, yo, yeah, I'm in. Yeah. And some people are like, sorry, I think that was a phone.
So tell me a bit about your background and like where's your passion come from for the gut and the brain and all of this and this way of approaching it as well? Where's the root of all that for you?
Gosh, I guess, I mean, I started doing nutrition. I met someone who was my partner, who we went out together, and he was just a very incredible rehabilitator and knew the human body. And I was doing some personal training, and I was like, he said to me one day, what, exactly the same question, what makes your boat float? Yeah. And I was like, well, it's food, really. Something to do with food. And I think back then, you know, when I was 26, I don't think I knew nutritionists existed. Like, I didn't know. I mean, now everyone's a nutritionist. But 15 years ago, it was quite niche, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So I got into the CHEK system, which is Corrective Holistic Exercise Kinesiology with Paul Chek.
I see, yeah.
And sort of spent a good 5 years in the CHEK Institute and with all these Checkies, and that was where the philosophy was learnt. Okay. The philosophy of food, the basics, the living, the land, how the whole cycle goes round. And then we opened up together a clinic called Move 360, which was basically about MOTs. And looking at the visceral body against the musculoskeletal. So people would come in with a shoulder pain, you'd get analysed, doing a physical MOT, and the guys would say, these nerves feed to your liver, these nerves feed to your knee. So then they'd see the acupuncturist or me, the nutritionist. And that's how my love for the human body started, really. You know, again, it was this one-tiered approach. Oh, let's get flat abs, let's get bigger thighs, let's get thinner. That was what was going on. But suddenly you were connecting the inner body to the outer body. And that's where it got exciting.
And was that surprising to people when they came in for that sort of work? Were they like, wow, it's my liver, that's incredible? And then did that take them on a journey? Did it actually begin one for them? Or were they all expecting that sort of treatment?
I remember when we left after 5 years, a guy left a card. He was an incredible guy. And he wrote us a card which just said, you guys have created a space to let everyone learn.
Yeah, amazing.
And it exactly was that. It was an open floor to learn about each other, themselves, and the body. Yeah. So, absolutely. Then I went my separate way, went to Harley Street. I'd started writing a book, The Best Possible You, because in my work with the CHEK Institute, I'd worked with Emma Lane, who was big into the gut, again, when nobody knew they had a gut. And that's where my love for sort of parasites and the emotions started, you know, how the parasites could influence your brain. And we know that a lot of brain stuff we've always known that a lot of brain stuff is parasites, but just how the emotions change when we've got these infections. So that was really interesting work with Dr. Omar Amin, who is a parasitologist, and he started PCI testing. Emma brought it over to the UK, and that was about really testing a whole assay of parasites, which most tests were for, you know, Giardia, Blasto, Diamenta, HP. And I was like, well, okay, that client doesn't have 4 parasites, but there are thousands known to man. So that I was really interested for a long time about that, and still am.
So things like blastocystis hominis, and there's been a bit of a change in perspective on that, hasn't there, in recent years, that actually maybe some parasites, because of our microbiome being so much like a jungle of so many different communities, that possibly there's a role of actually increasing tolerance of the immune system, something that's kind of there to like poke at the T cells and things, and actually make the gut barrier really resilient. What's your thoughts on that?
I know that it was always under a parasite, wasn't it? And I think on some tests it still is classed. You know, it's the same school of thought as HP. Some people were like, oh, well, you need it, don't need to clear it. Now it's blasto, don't need it, we need it, don't need to clear it. I remember asking Dr. Omar, and he was like, yeah, if you've got a parasite, you need to get rid of it.
There's so much more to it, though, isn't there? I mean, it's
exactly.
just so, you can't, like, we don't know enough yet to know this is what your microbiome needs to look like. We know that diversity is good. Yeah. That's one thing. But, you know, there's a lot of things we don't know exactly what. As long as you do the right jobs with it, it's okay. It's a bit like there's many roads to Rome, isn't it, with the microbiome? So I just think that anything that's labelled as a bad guy, unless it's something that we, you know, like Giardia or something, you know, or Clostridium difficile, like they're bad guys. Yeah. But if we go too much in sort of identifying who's good and who's bad, the good can turn bad and the bad can turn good if they're not in enough quantity. So
yeah, absolutely. It's very isolated to say that Blastocystis hominis is a baddie. Yeah. I mean, people I think who say HP is a baddie need to do some more research, but I think on an isolated case, it's never isolated.
Yeah, there's always a reason, isn't there? And it's getting to that reason.
And in relation to which other pathogenics or which other gram-positive or negative bacteria, in which environment, and what is the environment? You know, I definitely remember, you know, a good 10 years ago, it was all about killing the baddies. Yeah. You know, we'd be like, let's do a kill, and take people through these, you know. You'd have to get people in the right place, obviously, that they had enough, you know, gumption to be able to get through it. But now it's about seeding it all out, like feeding the gut better and changing the environments. And that's how I see it. You know, if you've got bugs in you and you're an angry person, it's absolutely, you let the bugs carry on, you know? You probably had them for 10 years. So it's about you know, these little different environments that we have in our lives. That's where we're trying to do the work. And, you know, the bugs are smarter. So they're just going to, what we're trying to do is make it go from a chaotic place in each of the environments to a tranquil, peaceful place. So the bugs go, I actually don't want to be here anymore. This is way too zen for me.
I'm off.
I'm off.
So true.
And that's, I think, where I'm working with the gut a lot more, because, well, it makes sense and it's true. And with the amount of health anxiety we have, I mean, that's another massive one.
Huge.
It's not good enough to be giving people pots of pills, because they can't. I mean, the only things humans can do every day consistently is basically brush their teeth. No pun intended, no plug intended. But it's true. Yeah. You know, what do you do consistently every day? Oh, brush my teeth. Okay, we'll take these 5 supplements. No chance. Yeah. You know, because they run out of steam after 3 days. Because you promised them a pill. Yeah. Because an antibiotic is a pill, or a Nurofen is a pill, and you see the difference. Well, you don't see a difference with supplements in 3 days. In fact, maybe ever.
Now, let's hear from some of our listeners who've been navigating their own gut health journeys. And don't forget, you can be part of the conversation too. Follow us on Instagram to find out how to get involved and stay up to date on our upcoming guests.
I have IBS. I've had that all my life. And I also have hiatus hernia. So I've been doing various things. I've been taking probiotics for my gut for about a year now. And I've been taking omeprazole, but I thought I don't really like drugs, so I stopped it. I cut it down over 4 weeks, and it should have been longer because I had a dreadful rebound reaction.
Oh, it's very common. Yeah.
I stopped the omeprazole because I was worried about the side effects.
When you were taking it, what were you experiencing? Because it does have an impact on the gut. So I'm interested in how that felt for you.
I didn't have any side effects, but a friend of mine had told me that a friend of hers had some serious side effects, and I looked at it. It had been fine. I mean, but I'd been taking it for years, so I kind of got a bit nervous about it all.
Okay.
I always feel like I'm between a rock and a hard place because any medication isn't perfect. But the hiatus hernia and the reflux had affected my vocal cords, and they were swollen. So when I went to respiratory in the hospital, they said to take Gaviscon at night, which I'd kind of been doing on and off. But then when I went back again, my vocal cords were fine. And I had to then think about it and go, well, I don't really want my vocal cords to be affected because they've already been affected by COVID. I used to be a semi-professional singer, and now my voice is crap when I'm singing. So I don't want it to get any worse.
Do you use any sort of support for the esophagus, like a slippery elm or marshmallow, something natural like that?
No, I hadn't considered that. I've been gargling with salt water.
Yeah. One of the most important things to sort of look after is definitely the esophagus when it comes to GERD, because that acid is coming up or there's a nasal drip. And it might be worth looking at something that can soothe it, sort of to maintain the good bacteria and also the alkaline environment that you want in the esophagus. You want an acidic environment in the stomach, which potentially is weak in yours because acid reflux exists. But a marshmallow or a slippery elm would be really nice to, certainly as you're a singer, to keep the esophagus in really good shape. So I'd go ahead and get a slippery elm powder, something like that.
So you would use the powder, just in a drink or something?
Yeah, exactly. You can just mix it in a drink and take it after meals.
It might be helpful to just illustrate the connection with when your stomach acid is not good enough compared to when it's over producing acid, because I think it's a really common misconception that almost everyone feels that if they're getting acid indigestion or reflux, it's because you've got too much acid in the stomach and it's then rising up and damaging the esophagus that's not really designed to withstand that level of acid. So, I mean, it makes logical sense, doesn't it? But actually, most cases of reflux that we see, it's actually an underproduction of acid or a real weakness in that area, like Hannah alluded to. And what then happens is you haven't really got the power. So the acid is such digestive power to start breaking down your proteins that without that power to digest the protein foods particularly, what happens is the food actually stays in your stomach a bit longer than it should because it's kind of hanging about. It's waiting to be broken down, and it's a bit of a cement mixer in your stomach if you want a visualization. And if that acid is not strong enough, it's like not quite got the chemicals it needs to break it down. So what happens is the cement mixer of your stomach has to go like harder and harder at it, and the it's very strong muscle inside of your stomach, but it actually pulls on that valve at the top. So you've got at the top of your stomach, you've got a valve. It's like a sphincter, and it sort of blocks off the esophagus from the stomach. So that's the esophagus, is the bit where you swallow things down your throat. That's the tube that leads to your stomach, and it's protected then by that sphincter. So if your acid is too low, that then does tend to weaken the sphincter. And the acid in your stomach is so incredibly strong that even when it's weak for stomach acid, it's still extremely acidic in terms of what your esophagus can cope with. So very, very low, poor, deficient stomach acid will still burn your esophagus and give you those feelings. Is that something that you were aware of?
Yes, not quite in that great detail, but yes, and certainly more aware now. Well, I'm trying to support my gut as much as possible. Yeah. Also, I'm having acupuncture, And we're working specifically on the gut as well.
Good. That will help a lot, definitely. You mentioned that you're getting bloating and diarrhea and constipation as well.
Yes, I get both.
And you also mentioned that your GP was going to do a test, a stool test. Is that right?
Yeah. I have to, at the moment, I'm in constipation, so I have to wait.
Yeah.
And then I'll probably get a stool test for them next week. And he's put me on a new medication, famotidine.
Well, that might bring up a few bits and pieces. Sometimes when the bowels oscillate, there can definitely be some infection there. Sometimes fungal, but sometimes, definitely it's worth doing that test because the oscillation between the loose and the hard bowel can be something that's in the environment that doesn't want to be there for sure.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're doing a lot, and you're trying to do everything to resolve it. Would you say that you're a fast-paced person, Robin? Would you say that you're busy and or you take life in its stride?
Sorry. I'm an ATAC with chronic fatigue syndrome. So life is kind of a struggle because my head I want to do, and my body's going, I don't think so, not today.
Right. And how long's the chronic fatigue diagnosis been there?
I've had it well over 20 years. It is better. I mean, I've been doing things that Perrin technique, making sure that I rest when my body needs to rest, pacing myself.
Sure.
Again, the acupuncture.
Yeah.
I have been doing, quite a lot for my health over the years, but it is frustrating that things are slow because there's a lot of comorbidity, and I'm 71 as well.
There'll be a huge connection with your gut and the fatigue. Is that one of the connections you've explored over the years?
No, I didn't know there was a connection, really.
Yeah, there's many roots of connection really between the gut function, the digestive function, your ability to absorb nutrition, your microbiome, which is the bugs that live in your gut, and the way that they actually talk to your body, and your immune system. And so all of this, it's almost like endless possibilities of links, many links between your gut function and fatigue. So that, for the long term for you, that would be. And 71 is young. I would not think, it's because of my age, because actually that's sort of more of a cultural expectation there. And it's really no reason why you can't get your health back at the age of 71. So I would encourage you to pursue a real connection, maybe work with somebody that can really help you understand that connection, just because you've got overt gut issues, and even structurally you've got some issues there with the hiatus hernia. So these things will then be giving fuel to the fire for chronic fatigue syndrome, and even down to its most basic primitive level, the mitochondria are the bits inside your cells that actually make energy for you. So this is how you get energy to think, to move, to do everything in your body. You need power, and that power comes from something in your cell called a mitochondria. And your mitochondria are actually derived from bacteria that our bodies started to work with to then actually optimize the way that we as humans produce energy. So we're almost so closely related and interlinked. And so our bacteria in our microbiome that we now know a lot more about than we did 10, 20, 30 years ago, it actually drives the mitochondrial function in every human cell that we have. So it's not just your gut might be causing it because you might not be eating properly. It's so profound, the connection between the microbiome and the cellular function, which then drives everything. But so if your power is low and you've got chronic fatigue, there's a lot to be potentially explored there.
Right. Okay. Yes. I did a sensitivity test just before Christmas, and found out about a lot of foods that I was sensitive to, particularly all dairy. So since then, I've changed the way I've been eating, and I've cut out all dairy, and tried a lot of vegan alternatives, and noticed that a lot of puffiness seems to have gone, like from my ankles and knees.
One thing that I found really helpful, rather than kind of switching from one probiotic to another, is actually using a type of powdered fibre called PHGG. And that can really help. It sort of nurtures your own microbiome rather than relying on an external product, because they really don't colonize in your gut well at all. They just pass through and they have a transient effect. So as you say, you've been on it for a year, and then if you stop taking it within 2 weeks, you'll have the problems that you did. And whereas PHGG, it's partially hydrolyzed guar gum, and it's a really good food for your own microbiome. So it's like nurturing your own colonies back into power again, and that can be a really effective way of doing it. And it's very easy to take. Take a good heaped teaspoon in your coffee in the morning and you're done for the day. And it can be really helpful to do that, in my experience, rather than sort of continuing to take probiotics long term. That's not really what I would recommend. Would you agree?
Yeah, I use the PHGG a lot in clinic for exactly those reasons. And actually you might find it goes some way to resolving the constipation and the diarrhea. It can work in both ways. If you're constipated, it helps to loosen it, and if it's the other way, exactly the opposite. So the only thing I would say about PHGG, it's a 5 milligram dose. Start really small. Start with a sprinkle, then a double sprinkle, and build up to the maximum dose if you get to the maximum. But I use it a lot as well. Yeah,
it's a great one for kids as well, isn't it? Yeah. Kids that aren't eating vegetables, you can put the PHGG in.
And actually, I mean, while we're on the subject, it's great for making banana cake with. Because it's heat resistant.
We'll have to share that recipe then. That sounds exciting.
It's heat resistant,
yes,
so you can throw it in your baking.
I get diarrhea daily, like sometimes 2-3 times, sometimes more a day. And then from that, I don't know if it's from that, but I often suffer with anemia. So I'm back and forth to the doctor to be on iron tablets. Okay. So suffer from a lot of fatigue and tiredness, sometimes nausea, which affects like eating and appetite. Definitely have like cognition issues and like memory problems. I guess a bit of depression and anxiety sometimes. Like sometimes some of the symptoms come and go. Like for a while I was getting kind of repetitive candida, and like vaginal thrush, and also like cracks in the corners of my mouth, which kind of didn't seem to go away with anything, unless I used like kind of, I don't know if it's called an antimicrobial or like an antifungal maybe. I used like an antifungal capsule, and I would put that in the corners of my mouth, and then that would be the only thing that really cleared it up. Okay. Yeah, I get stomach pain and bloating, but actually since listening to your podcast and taking more time around eating and the process of sitting down and acknowledging food, sometimes that is a lot better. I get UTIs as well, but they come and go, so I'm not suffering from that at the moment. For the last 10 years anyway, I've always been quite health conscious. Definitely before that, I probably abused my body in diet and stuff like that. Okay. But recently I've cut out gluten and cut out sugar and cut out alcohol. And I am seeing like definitely like the candida side not flare up as much anymore, but the rosacea and the acne, I think it's rosacea, I think it's acneic rosacea. Yeah. That's quite a recent thing, and even like through changing the diet, it's very persistent, and it's not really affected, like the gluten or the no sugar, it's not really affected anything in the acne.
Okay, how long have you been? How often have you been quite low sugar now? Is it just recently? You said.
Oh, since mid-April, I think. We went on holiday, and even just having a prosecco and an ice cream, like the next day, it would really, really affect me. Yeah. And then after that, I had a UTI for like the rest of the holiday and stuff like that. So when we came back from Easter holidays, I thought, no, I'm just going to cut it out completely. And that has helped. Like I haven't had a UTI or any thrush or anything. I do take caprylic acid, and that seems to, when I take that seems to stop the thrush. It's when I stop taking that I do notice it comes back quite quickly.
Okay. Well, now the sugar will feed that directly. So it's still quite early days, I'd say as well. It's been a few weeks really. So I think maybe have some patience going forward and just keep, stick with it, because the sugar and the candida are like best buddies. Like, you take one of them away, the other one will start to withdraw. So, caprylic acid is also really abundant in coconut oil. So perhaps you could just use that really liberally in your cooking and preparing food, and then you don't sort of feel like maybe you're so reliant on caprylic acid supplements.
Yep. I was thinking maybe D-mannose as well for those UTIs, which is quite a natural product to help clean out the UTI. So that you can just get that from the pharmacy. And I would say that, you're on the right path. Maybe think about really sort of doing as much as you can over the next sort of 3-4 months minimum, because I think you'll resolve quite a lot of those symptoms by what you're already doing. And in maybe, by the end of the summer, you might find yourself, potentially symptom free if you just keep working on that diet and those supplements with that bit of advice.
So I wasn't sure if I'd maybe, because I would say like a flexitarian diet, so predominantly plant, but then I've tried to include fish, and I am starting to include meat again, but I do notice I get a sore stomach after that. And I wasn't sure if it had, after listening to the podcast, if it was anything to do with acid or not.
Yeah, it could be, because if you've been more sort of plant-based, your stomach acid will your body will adapt to whatever you're doing. So you don't need as much acid to digest plants. So when you eat meat again, it's really common to feel that you struggle to digest it. But betaine as a supplement can be really helpful in the short term to just help. It basically supplements your physiological stomach acid so that you can then digest the meat proteins more easily. And then by eating meat regularly in your diet, it won't be long before your own production of stomach acid will upregulate again to actually accommodate that. So I think that's probably a good idea from the anemia perspective to make sure that you do have meat in your diet. And, it may reassure you to think of every symptom that you've mentioned, the anemia, the fatigue, the nausea, the cognition issues and memory, depression and anxiety, candida, and the cracks in the corners of your mouth. All of these things are connected as one. So I think what Hannah suggested is give it 3 months and let's just clear the fog of what's going on for you, because if you really eliminate sugar now and take care of your diet, introduce some meat for the iron, give it 3 months, you may not have any of these symptoms. But if you do, it would have cleared the fog of the other things that are clouding the judgment of what you really need to do next. Exactly. And it will expose the next steps for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's perfect. And it's good to have that definitive kind of timeline for try this for 3 months and stuff like that, because I just, wasn't sure how long to really continue.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, and sometimes that's the issue. We pick up a product and we take it for a few days or a couple of weeks and we're not really sure. So as a rule of thumb, a 12-week, timeline works pretty well to, as we said, clear the fog.
Basically now I still feel bloated, sometimes pain, some reflux at times. Belching is the word that you would use. Yeah. So I still feel that basically I'm comfortable. Some days, some days more than others. Also some days when I'm with my period as well, I feel I get worse. So I wonder if there is also a connection with that too.
Okay. Since they began, have you had any periods of time when they've completely resolved?
Yes. So because I had the SIBO diagnosed in 2021, after trying just with diet, and nothing was really changing. So on 2022, I think I took some antibiotics.
Right.
So I did too.
For SIBO, was it like rifaximin or something like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But it was a mix. So rifaximin and another one there.
Okay.
I don't remember the name now. So I took those, and then I think I have 2 courses.
Okay.
And also with, diet and that. And after that improved for a while. But recently, since the new year, I've been having issues again. Not as bad as before, but I think now because I'm more aware of symptoms, I start to worry a bit more about them again.
SIBO does have a very high rate of recurrence, actually, and I think the key to recovering from SIBO is to really understand why you've had that overgrowth in the small intestine to begin with. So whether that's an issue with your stomach acid not being strong enough, and that's contributing to bacteria, or some weaknesses in the valves. Have you ever had any problems with your appendix or your gallbladder?
No, I mean, I always I've always been a constipated person, so I always struggle with constipation. Since very young. I think has been also quite emotional kind of constipation. When you go out like on holidays and you can't go to the toilet because you're not in your home and things like that. So I wonder if that is also kind of like a reason for the SIBO as well.
Yeah, I'd think about it I always think of SIBO and constipation actually in a sort of an energy way. So has the body got enough energy to get rid of things from the gut, but also to eliminate? So there's maybe potentially a lot of things to think about. What kind of diet do you keep?
Now I try to eat, a lot of different food. I try not to eat like processed food. I try to eat a lot of vegetables and fruit. But I also eat, meat and things like that. So it's just because I've been going through this for a long time. I think I learned that I should. I think I've always been keeping like a healthy diet, I guess, but now is more than probably a few years ago.
So what you could, try also, because there's sort of potentially an absorption issue going on, and although people can eat healthy diets, it's whether the food's being absorbed enough. So maybe think about doing a trial of reducing the raw food that you eat, salads, nuts, seeds, anything raw.
Okay.
Try and maybe do a couple of weeks on a cooked food diet, and see if your symptoms slightly reduce.
I see.
And also potentially keep up, sometimes people miss a meal because they're busy or have too big a meals.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 meals throughout the day of cooked food can just help keep the bowel a bit more regular. And also with the SIBO and the lack of energy, we really want to make sure we've got those fat-soluble vitamins there, A, D, E, and K. So, you could have a look at where they're all coming from, but certainly your meats, your proteins and fats. But again, think about, I always say to some clients, imagine you're a baby with no teeth and you've got to absorb the food. So when your digestive system's struggling, try and give it the food in a way that it doesn't have to do a lot of work. So maybe soups with a broth base, slow cooked meats and vegetables, but really keep it so it's easy for your body to absorb, and then you take the nutrients from. A lot of the time when people get ill or digestive issues, we all head for the salads and nuts and seeds and hard fibrous broccoli tender stem, and actually we want to do the exact opposite. How can I absorb the food and uptake it?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because now that you mentioned that, actually, when I'm going to the toilet, I sometimes can see like the seeds. Yeah,
undigested food. Give the nuts and seeds a wide berth and try and do the cooked, and just as an experiment to see if that increases or decreases some symptoms, and obviously makes an improvement.
You could also adjust the timings, maybe. You tend to have more power in your gut earlier in the day, but a lot of people eat their calories at the end of the day. So maybe try and finish either have a main meal at lunchtime and something much lighter in the early evening, or try and finish your day's worth of food quite early and see if that makes any difference, because your digestion can be a little bit weaker in the evening time, and then you're going to bed and lying down. So perhaps maybe just as an experiment, finish earlier and then have that whole fasting time overnight until breakfast the next day. And see if that makes any difference as well, because that can sometimes help the overgrowths, because it allows the gut to clean itself out better. Okay, so interesting calls there today. So reflux is something that has come up there. So should we dig into the connection between that and sort of stress states and the mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it started by talking about the gut brain, and the stomach, anxiety and reflux are exactly that. I don't know about you, but I see so many more young females with anxiety, which is a stomach, which manifests into acid reflux. Sometimes males, but predominantly more females. And again, there's a huge autoimmune link to females as well, and it comes down to stress. But I guess the biggest thing about the stomach for me is this. The stomach holds frustration. If we look at, look at the emotional connection to all the organs, and we're not only digesting food there, we're digesting who we are. We're digesting the acceptance of who we are, our thoughts, our feelings, and that repression. When I see acid reflux people who have acid reflux, behind it all is this expectation of themselves, overdoing, overcreating, and that can manifest as being very physically busy, but also mentally as well, like their brains don't turn off. And again, it comes back to that question. You have to get to the right question. You have to dig to the point where it's not about taking an enzyme, Swedish bitters, slippery elm. Of course, all these things help mechanically and changing their physiology. But on the emotional side, acid reflux is resolved long term by looking at where that anxiety and that stress and that dissatisfaction almost with self or what they're doing, or that codependency, whether that's in whichever environment, when that's addressed, that's when you see the results.
Do you find that when you see that and you're working with somebody on one of your 12-week programs, that is it easily received, that sort of insight, or is it a big surprise? Like, does it seem to fit and answer a lot of questions that have previously been unanswered, or is it quite a challenging thing to actually have that insight into what might be causing the reflux?
Yeah, I think, I remember in my early practice, you'd hit the nail on the head way too soon in terms of trying to help someone. I'm not a psychologist, but nutrition is, the biggest emotional thing we do as humans is eat. It's an excellent food is an excellent mimic for lost love. Sometimes we actually just need a hug. That kind of idea. So people have been doing what they've been doing for so long, expecting a different result, and not getting a different result. And so when you kind of can pinpoint something not working, either two things happen. One, it's a relief, a sense of relief. And actually it's not that difficult. And the other is that they don't want to hear it, or they don't want to move on from the place of being stuck, because being stuck is quite comfortable, which is often why they've seen 8 practitioners or taken 100 supplements or investigated lots of different things, have eliminated everything. And the biggest question there is always, well, if you've seen all these people, how and they're all brilliant, how can I help you?
So I've often asked that question. What do you expect of me?
What do you expect differently?
My role here? Yeah.
And it's just, we can't take away from the fact that digestive issues stem in the emotional, in the brain, the gut-brain axis. For sure, you can have some faulty plumbing with a few sphincters. and go and see a VM, and they do wonders. I send a lot of people.
What's VM?
Visceral manipulators.
Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
I send a lot of people there to look at sphincters and whether they're frozen or running anti-clockwise.
Yeah.
But more often than not, the stress starts from a belief, from a wound, and it manifests physiologically into the body, and gut issues arise.
That's really, really worth pressing that issue, because no one is exempt from this, are they? So I think particularly if you see a certain type of kind of power personality, like, no, it's nothing to do with that. Like, I handle everything. I cope really well with everything. I've just got a lot of things to do, but I manage really well. But actually the physiology of the emotions and how the mind connects to the gut and the rest of the body, it's just physiology, isn't it?
Yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
matter what type of personality you are, those emotions will be impacting every gut secretion, every saliva production, all of it will be impacted, won't it? So nobody's exempt from considering this for themselves. It's just the readiness to go there.
It's the readiness to the change, absolutely. And the more open you are with your emotions, the ability to express emotions is really paramount to not having gut health issues. If you are not good at talking about how you feel, that's you pushing down. Think of depression. We're depressed because we can't accept the reality that's here potentially, and so then we get a drug to push it down even further, not really finding the solution to the reality that we didn't like, and now the reality that we're in. So expression of self is definitely is key.
So is there anything else that's come up through our chat or through the calls that you wanted to highlight before we wrap up?
I think the biggest thing for me with the work that I do and the people I've seen is trying to get people to open up. Really to understand them, to understand why they're in this place of discomfort. And that support, one of the biggest things I hear is that they didn't think this existed. People think there's only omeprazole. Or citalopram. And actually, it's really, they see a lot of change. You can see people go, oh my God, I'm in a safe place. And I tell people that you can get rid of this problem. I mean, that's music to their ears. They've never heard that before.
Symptoms are just messages at the end of the day, aren't they? Just a signal telling you something's not right.
Right.
Just listen to it and
work
with it.
There's that wonderful analogy of the iceberg.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
So here's the waterline and the iceberg peeps up and you're like, oh, I've just got a symptom.
Yeah.
Well, that's been brewing for 10, 15 years. And that's why we need to heed symptoms and get to the root cause of where the pain is, which in my experience is more than not emotionally rooted.
Yeah, great.
A huge thank you to Julia and Hannah for sharing their insights today. You can connect with Hannah on social media @The Gut Clinic and follow Julia @JuliaDavies_nutrition for more gut health tips and updates. And stay tuned. More exciting episodes coming your way soon. Thanks for supporting Gutology, whether you're downloading the podcast or trying our game-changing products like our microbiome-friendly toothpaste. We'll see you next time.